Hello, everyone. I just sat down for a few minutes to have a cup of coffee and thought I would talk to y'all a few minutes about something that I have been doing, and that is preparing for canning season. And there's several things that I do each year to prepare for my busy canning season. Now, the first thing that I am doing, and I've already started doing, is buying my canning supplies. And unless you have been under a rock somewhere for the last 4 or 5 years, you know that during the pandemic we had a severe shortage of canning jars and canning lids and things like that. Even there was a shortage of vinegar. And I don't think that those shortages happened because, like the vinegar, it didn't happen because there was a shortage of apples to make the apple cider vinegar or something like that. It was, the lack of manufacturing. So right now, with the situation we have going on with the tariffs, I know we have canning lids that are being made here in the United States, but what about the material that they use to make those canning lids? Is that also made here in the United States? The packaging, is that made here in the United States? So those are things that we need to be considering. I don't know if these companies all purchase their supplies outside of the country. But my guess is that something in that canning process probably comes, or in that manufacturing process, probably comes from outside of the country. I know a lot of the cardboard and, just the cardboard type packaging, I think about 80% of that comes from China. And so then you've got the rubber that's inside the seals. And, I'm not sure what all is involved in that, but it's just something to be thinking about. So right now I am making sure that I've got canning lids enough to last for at least 2 to 3 years. And I do that because if we have something else, Lord knows that the World Economic Forum is talking about another pandemic. And so, they talked about a pandemic in 2019 and early 20. We had a pandemic start. So anyway, I am not leaving anything to chance. I will make sure I've got enough canning supplies to last me for 2 to 3 years, and that will include my canning lids. Of course, my canning rings last forever because I don't leave them on the jars, and I clean them after each use and dry them and put them away. So, they'll last me for many, many, many years. And then vinegar, make sure. Now, that's another thing during the pandemic. We started to see the 4% acidity vinegar show up on the grocery store shelves and different places. So make sure that you look if you're buying vinegar, and just know that if your recipe calls for vinegar, it's basing that on 5% acidity. If you cannot get 5% and you have to go with a 4%, then if your recipe calls for 1 cup of vinegar, then you need to add 1 1/4 cup of vinegar. So there are alternatives so that you can use whatever is available. Obviously, if the acidity, there are vinegars that are 7 and 9 and, various different percents of acidity. In those cases, you would have to use a whole lot less vinegar. But the other thing that I plan to purchase right away will be my canning spices and seasonings. There are a handful of things that I have used in the past where I have used Mrs. Wage's packaged mixes. Don't use those very often. I prefer my own recipes and less additives. But, pickling spices and, all the seasonings that I'm going to use, will be needing for my pasta sauces and things like that. And then, of course, I make sure I've probably got 10 or 12 boxes of canning salt on the shelf right now. And I add to that every year so that I never get low on canning salt. And because, this is a lifestyle for me. This is not something I just started. It's something I've been doing most of my life. And I don't plan to stop anytime soon. So make sure that you've got all of those things on your shelf. And then look at your lids and not your lids, but your rings, and make sure they're in good shape. If they're not, then you might want to, try to buy some lids and rings. And then look at your canners. Make sure that your canners are in good working condition now, because if you should need to get parts for your canner, right now's the time to do it. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a project and have to stop in the middle of your project and try to, go out and find parts. If you start right now and go ahead and get an extra gauge, or, maybe you look in the drawer and make sure that the jiggler for your canner is still in the drawer where, or if you put it inside of your canner, make sure everything's there. If you've got a canner that needs gaskets, then it doesn't hurt to go ahead and get an extra gasket and have it on hand. Sometime I'll go ahead and tell you something that I used to do. I don't have gaskets with my canners anymore, but years ago, whenever I still had the canners that used gaskets, at the beginning of the season, when the canner had set for sometimes months at a time, mine never sets that long anymore, but if it had set for 2 or 3 or 4 months, then I would take my gasket and I would put it in a sink full of water and let it soak in that water for a while before I tried to use it. It just softens it up, and it'll make your gaskets last longer. So that's something you might want to, go ahead and get it out and do that, so that whenever canning season comes, everything's ready. But leave in the comments if there's something that you use for your canning that I didn't mention. And let me know, if there's something that you do each year to prepare. I'm going to get new gauges for both of my All-American canners because I've been using them for a few years. And I called the other day to ask my county extension office if they could check my canners. And they told me that they have a new person there that hasn't been trained in that yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and get new gauges so that I'll know that my canners are ready to go. And, get them everything ready, and then check your jars. Start checking your jars and make sure you don't have nicks and cracks and things like that. And at some point, I may have already shown at some point on a video, but I'll show you how I store my jars as I empty them. I bought boxes years ago on Amazon. And so whenever I am emptying my jars, they get washed spotless. And then in the bottom of the box, I put a layer of paper towel, and then I flip my jars upside down on top of that paper towel. And by doing that, since I store my jars in a storage building, that prevents, spiders and, whatever creepy crawlies might get into my building. It prevents them from getting into the jars. I have in the past found jars that had dirt daubers' nests in them, and ants, and I mean, you can just get all kinds of things in your jars whenever you're storing them in a utility building or in a garage. So by doing that, it keeps my jars clean. Now, you could go ahead and put your lids and rings back on them, but I find that it saves me time by doing that. And of course, I have some jars that I have stored on the shelf where I have just put water in them to fill up a canner. And I find that my canner works more efficiently if I have it full. And so I will just fill up a jar. And by doing that, I have sterile water on the shelf if I were to ever have a need for sterile water to cleanse a wound, or, I mean, it's drinkable. It's purified water that would be drinkable. So being here in East Tennessee, we know about needing water, drinking water, after the storm we had last year. So think about those things. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing and like the channel, like the videos, and leave the comment about what you do to prepare for your canning season. So until the next time, God bless you.